Cracks and Pomo will be releasing a zine featuring a variety of writers, some of whom have been featured on this podcast. To order a copy or to make a contribution to our funds, please DM at Cracks and Pomo. Okay, so we are back at Cracks and Postmodernity. We have Jordan Castro, who is a writer from Cleveland originally, correct?
Yeah.
And he recently published the book called The Novelist, which came out last year. And we're very excited to have Jordan on. So Jordan, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So, first thing I'm going to say about The Novelist, first thing is that everyone should get it because it's a lot of fun, a lot of laughs, but also really makes you think. For me personally, it's really interesting to hear somebody writing about the life of a writer in the way that you do, because you're kind of looking, I don't know, very introspectively, very like transparently at what goes on in the lifestyle of a writer. And like personally, again, like I related to it very much because over the last year, I spent most of my time trying to delve into my own writing. And I found so many recognizable things, from the social media addiction, getting sidetracked from writing, to several other things we'll bring up. But I would say first off, like, why write a novel about a novelist?
Yeah, I think I sort of didn't intend to at first. You know, I had been working on another novel, and I was like waking up every morning and like working on this novel that was horrible. You know, it was like this totally like debasing and dispiriting, you know, thing where I would wake up early before Nicolette would wake up, and I would like, you know, work for a few hours before my day started on something that just like wasn't getting any better, and I like didn't know what I was doing, and like half the time I would like be scrolling Twitter for, you know, a large portion of that. And I think like I started writing this, or at least writing about writing almost as like a way to just kind of explore what was like actually happening, you know, where it's like I had an idea of how I was going to spend my morning, or about you know, what I was doing when I was sitting down in front of my computer. You know, I'm sitting down to write, but in reality, like you know, I was doing all kinds of things. Like I was making tea, I was using the internet, I was getting up and eating, I was going to the, you know, I was texting, whatever it was. Like there's all kinds of things happening when I was quote unquote writing that like had nothing to do with writing. Most of the time I wasn't even writing, and so I just wanted to kind of play around with that.
Yeah, and like what's really interesting is that I find myself doing the same thing when I'm having one of those writing days that, like, yeah, I get distracted by Twitter and Instagram, and then I make myself tea, and then I eat, and then I have to go to the bathroom. But I don't know if it's a writer thing, or maybe all of us do this in a way, but all those mundane, like, things within our routine take on this a meaning that's greater than themselves. It's like there's something present within it all, and you end up saying this later on in the novel, that like you have a sense that there's something sacred about the everyday, and even the dumb stuff like scrolling through Twitter and like closing the app and then opening it again, and then all the way to the poop scenes. Like, I don't know. So what can you say about that? Like, why is it, or like what is it that you perceive within those boring everyday things that like makes it worth writing in so much detail about?
I last week I visited a class at the new school.
Okay.
And yeah, and the professor like asked me something similar, and I was like gonna talk about how in Viktor Frankl's book Man's Search for Meaning, you know, he has this idea that like the meaning of life is not like one big overarching thing, but it's sort of like latent in every small decision that you make. You know, the meaning of my life is you know, exists each time I make a decision. You know, and then the sort of bigger picture thing is comprised of those little decisions. But like before I could say any of that, I was like, there's just, you know, I was like, maybe you guys have read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And the professor interrupted me and was like, that book I just thought was so sad. Like the Holocaust was so sad. And then like the students in the class were like, the Holocaust was like so sad. And they were just like saying the Holocaust was sad, like for like a couple of minutes. It was like, maybe it was just like a minute and a half or something like that. But I just thought it was like, it was also like 8 a.m. So I was like waking up, and I don't know, I just thought it was kind of like kind of funny, just kind of like,
Interesting.
yeah. I mean, it is sad, obviously, but like, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, Viktor Frankl. I don't know. I mean, but that's kind of the point. Like, the Holocaust is sad, but there's something more within the sadness, I guess. Or the fact that you're sad is a sign that, like, you're. I mean, this is an Aquinas thing, that sadness is the awareness of an absent good. So, like,
yeah.
You can choose to take a nihilistic approach to, like, the feeling of sadness, but it could also be like, okay, but there's a sign that I want something greater.
Yeah, one of the things to, like, to, yeah, there's a couple of things there. Like, one, Viktor Frankl. It's sort of like a cliche, or like almost like talk about this book, but it is true that, like, even in the camps, there were people making the decision to, like, share their scraps of bread with others, or to, like, sing or something like that. And to me, that is profound, and it is beautiful. But then there's the other thing that you're talking about, which is like, you can only, you can only know, if I say something is bad or something is sad, it's because I have some transcendent good standard to compare it with, or whatever. There's a kind of grace in even being able to recognize that something sad is sad,
but even, like, not just sadness, but even the dumb things that we do as humans, like getting sidetracked while writing a novel because I am addicted to Instagram or Twitter. You can feel hopeless because of it and say, like, okay, look how limited I am. I can't do anything. But if there's this wider scope of meaning, to, like, okay, yeah, I'm limited, and yet there's this higher ideal that I'm striving towards, and even though I fall short, like, I don't know, like, I got the sense while reading this that even though, like, you keep you don't get very far that morning while you're writing, that you're on your way to something that's important. And that, like, I don't know, like, that resonated with me because I feel that way. Like, some days it's like, wow, I accomplished nothing. What a piece of shit I am. And yet that's not the end of the story, because it's not just me. There's more to this picture.
Yeah. And definitely there's something to be said for, like you were saying, these things, like getting distracted or failing to live up to an ideal, I guess what I'm saying is there's a way of talking about these things, like, we're so distracted by our phones, or like, in this novel there's a poop scene, and, like, there's something holy or something like that about the poop scene. And I'm not trying to do, I mean, there's a way of talking about these things where, like, you just say, like, our depraved materiality is holy. And I think I was reading something about, maybe it was an interview with Tessa Moshfegh or something like that, and she's like, she says something to the effect of, like, or at least this is my memory of it. She's like, I wanted to talk about how, like, the anus is holy or something like that, and, like, what if shit is holy, and to me, there's, like, it's almost like this kind of, like, the way that people will, like, read de Sade or something like that and be like, sort of fetishize this kind of darkness. But to me, sorry,
no. I'll say a thought about
okay. Because to me, all of that stuff can only be significant when it's infused with a perspective from outside of it. Like, if you are just like a mouse, just kind of, like, reacting to stimuli on a screen, that is bleak. If you're struggling upward toward something and, like, kind of stumbling along the way, that's a different story. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I mean, first with the Tessa Moshfegh, like, I feel like reading My Year of Rest and Relaxation, this protagonist is, like, a kind of shitty person, but I don't know. There is a similar sense of, like, ritualism within the everyday, because, like, she goes to the bodega to get her 2 coffees and, watches the Whoopi Goldberg movies over and over again. It's like, again, it's very mundane. She's, again, not a very compassionate, kind person, but you do feel like even within the limitation, the sin, that there's, I don't know, like, there's something more here. And especially, I don't know, even with what you said about de Sade, like, sure, de Sade's this atrocious human being, but at least this is a Palia thing, that de Sade maintains the, I guess, the kind of spiritual legacy of France and of Europe, because he's reacting against Rousseau and these very, like, these Enlightenment philosophers who believe in the benevolence of human nature. Totally. It's like the rationalism. It's like, no, like, he's straight up satanic, and yet the satanic is a greater sign of the sacred than, like, Enlightenment rationalism.
Totally. I mean, I think it's valuable for that reason, exactly. Where I'm totally not a rationalist. I don't have a sort of rosy view of, like, human reason or whatever, and so I think stuff like that is very valuable, and sort of, and I think too, like, one of the reasons why novels in particular are more likely to show that side than like, for example, like I don't know, like I'm trying to think of like the opposite of that. Maybe someone just has like a beautiful time and a beautiful world, and God is good and da 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 da. Is that like sort of the novel is sort of like just like inherent to the form, is like it's like the site of human folly or something like that. Where like and so I think showing, because even books like Crime and Punishment, which at the end have like a very didactic like Christian conversion essentially. It's still like 550 pages of like a murderer wigging out. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, so I think those things are, And so anyway, I think I didn't mean to like totally, I haven't read my Year of Rest and Relaxation, but.
I'd say it's worth it.
Okay.
It's fun. It's a fun one, but.
Yeah. I don't know. I've something at the media surrounding this last one just totally turned me off, but.
Yeah. That's understandable.
Yeah.
But no, so let's go back to the poop. One of the highlights, I think, of the novel. Because, I mean, some people are grossed out. I was fascinated because I have like a poop fixation. But it's not just weird. Like, you do have a sense that, again, there's something ritualistic and there's something beautiful about the process. And there's like, the poop is a symbol of the limitation, I think, of human beings, that there's something gross about us and fallen. But I mean, I was mentioning to Jordan before that there's this Jewish poop prayer.
Did you end up finding it?
So let's see. What is it? The prayer was first mentioned. No, I don't have to look for this. The potty prayer, Jewish values online. Oh, here we go. Blessed are you, Hashem, our God, King of the universe, who created the human with wisdom and created within him many openings and many cavities. It is obvious and known before your throne of glory that if one of them were to be ruptured or one of them were to be blocked, it would be impossible to survive and to stand before you. Blessed are you, Hashem, the healer of all flesh, who acts wondrously. There's something very wondrous about pooping.
That's wild. Right. He says, and they ask you to imagine if one of them were blocked, you would die. Yeah. Wow.
So there's something there. But why? Why did you do the poop stuff? What point did it serve for you?
To be totally honest, I just was thinking about, okay, this novel's taking place over the course of 3 hours. Mm-hmm. What generally happens over these 3 hours in a morning, and that was part of it. And so I just tried to it really was sort of just that, and then I just tried to write about it in a way that was like as literary and as interesting and compelling as possible. And so that was really it. There was no kind of like, when I turned it into my editor, she was like, people are going to ask you about this, and maybe the poop is like a symbol for like, I can't remember what she suggested, like, for writing itself, or for the nature of self-expression, or maybe it's a funny joke about X, Y, and Z. And I just didn't I tried to map certain like things into the poop section. Like, there's a part where he is thinking about why the toilet paper is often more streaked on one side than the other.
Yeah.
And so he sort of thinks like, maybe he's like applying pressure, on one side more than the other. Maybe because he brings his arm around the right side, like he swipes it there a little more. And then he sort of, I think he realizes something about the lengths of his like middle finger and his pointer finger, and realizes that his middle finger is longer, and so applying more pressure. And so, but then and then he's so there are thoughts like that, but then there are thoughts where he is connecting his diet to like how like quote unquote clean.
Yes.
And so he has one idea about why this is the case, and then he realizes that he's wrong.
So he pizza on the ice.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So he thinks a clean diet equals clean poop. He realizes that he's wrong because sometimes he eats pizza or whatever, and then he wipes clean. And then he goes to the opposite thing. And so I tried to map on like a sort of way of almost like a dialectical way of like, self-exploration or something like that, or self-knowledge, where like, you think one thing, you kind of realize that you're wrong. Maybe you react against that and think the opposite thing. And then maybe, there's, the secret third thing or whatever, And so I tried to do all of this with that section. And so it had less to do with the poop, and just sort of, I was trying to, and then too, sorry, I'm I'm thinking about this thinking about it now, but like also maybe, maybe it has something to do with this sort of like the way that the narrator is just totally almost like overly self-aware, where it's like everything is sort of fraught with like a self-consciousness and like, just applied that to like every sort of even automatic activities. Yeah.
Because like, especially the part about wiping, like I think about these things and I wonder, because I have IBS, so like my poop is problematic. Sure. I've had some trauma with that, but I have to think about like, okay, what am I eating? How's it going to impact me? Also, like, how many times I'm going to have to wipe until it starts to irritate me?
Right.
But again, like, is that, I don't know, is there some...
You ever use a bidet?
It's hard. I've tried. Okay. In Europe, I've tried, but it's a little hard to figure out.
I got a bunch of emails from people being like, you should use a bidet. The one I remember was the writer Chloe Caldwell emailed me and said that I should. And then I was with my gym bro at Target after gym one time. We'd sometimes go to Target. And he was like, we passed one, like they just had him out. Bidets.
Really? In America?
In Target, yeah. In North Haven, the North Haven Target. In the past, he's like, dude, you got to change my life. You got to get one. And then I was like, really? And then it was like $30 or something like that. And I bought it and then he installed it for me.
Like one that you put on top of the toilet.
It's like wedged between you like kind of take off the toilet seat. You like screw it into the whatever screws right there. You connect it to the wall. He did it for me, so I don't really know. You connect it to the water line and then it works. Yeah.
Because I've seen one of those at the apartment of an Armenian friend. And I was like, okay, maybe it's like they're not really European, but maybe it's that. The only other time I've seen one in the U.S. was at the Trump Taj Mahal in Atlantic City, like 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. But yeah,
I'm not even recommending it, by the way. I was just curious.
It's kind of complicated. It's
also just un-American.
No, it is. It's against traditional American values.
That's right.
No, I mean, maybe this is too much information, but I wet the toilet paper first.
With what water?
What? Like if there's a sink right next to me, I'll wet it.
What if the sink isn't right next to you?
If it's that bad, I'll get up. The other thing,
what do you? Okay.
I'll just like shimmy over. Yeah. The other thing, this is when I'm getting gross. I like after I shower, I put Vaseline over there, down there, because I poop so much, and it does get irritated. So like I need to buffer it a little. But yeah, if I had a bidet, I don't know, they're weird. Freaks me out.
We can. No, we don't have to go further into this. I was just going to say,
we've gone pretty far.
We were talking about Augustine though, earlier before this, and I learned. I think my wife Nicolette told me that he had hemorrhoids so bad that he couldn't even sit up sometimes. He was just laying up in bed. Anyway,
there are definitely saint poop stories. I don't know.
But anyway, I'm legitimately, I'm not actually. It's like in my editor too. She was like, we tried to cut it down a bunch because she was like, we did cut it down a little, but she was like, she kept being like, people are going to ask you, and I just kind of like, maybe I got desensitized to it through the act of editing or whatever. But I'm really not that interested in my next novel has no poop in it at all.
Oh, wow. The only part that was a little gross was when the poop was spraying.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I laughed, but I was like, this is kind of nasty to like envision.
Yeah. My ex, I don't think this is. Yeah, I had an ex who was in like holistic healing school, and she there was like a few weeks where they were like talking about how your poop was a sign of your like overall health. But they were like for some reason weirdly fixated on whether or not it floated.
Yeah, that's a thing.
Okay,
that's definitely a thing.
Yes, she was always tracking it and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started working full time, I had really bad problems, and they gave me all this medication until I told my therapist about it because he's very holistic, and he was like, "You really don't need medication. Like, this is a stress problem. Like, if you can manage your stress, your poop will be better." And it turned out to be very true. But no, the one more poop thing, and we'll move on. Yeah. Have you ever seen Pasolini's 120 Days in Sodom?
No.
Okay. It's really creepy and gross. I don't recommend everyone watch it because it's really disturbing. One of the scenes involves a wedding feast, like a transvestite wedding feast, and at the feast they eat shit.
Whoa.
And the like most popular interpretation, considering like the whole arc of the film, is like consumerism sucks the sacred out of everything. Like to the point that humans become commodities and that we're sold shit and we're told to eat shit. So he uses the poop eating scene to like comment on, the culture. And I mean, he was a Marxist, but ultimately it was like he started flirting with Christianity once again. He's realizing, okay, but there's no sacred, whether in like capitalism or materialist Marxism. So I don't know. There could be that. I don't know. I don't know if that connects here, but
that's interesting. I would agree that capitalism tries to. I don't want to say the word capitalism. It's always such a horrible thing when people are like capitalism does this and capitalism does that. But it's true that I would maybe like sort of like radical consumerism and like individualism certainly does that. And sort of crony capitalism is something.
Yeah, I mean the free market as like a worldview, or the worldview it stems from. Because it's this claim of neutrality that like everything's neutral, our will is neutral, like there's no account for original sin. And then ultimately, if you don't have any, any higher ideal driving the direction of how we produce and spend, then everything will turn to shit because of sin.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, maybe the deeper truth about the market selling you shit to eat is that left to their own devices, people want that. You know what I'm saying? Like not only do people want to like sell it to you, but then people want to happily sort of gobble it up, and that's a problem.
Do you eat clean? Like, does that matter to you? How you eat?
Not in like a neurotic, like strict litigious way, but yeah, I eat like pretty healthy, I would say.
Yeah,
like probably very healthy compared to
because I feel like there is this like. I feel like the more I've progressed spiritually, I've lost interest in artificial kind of foods and ingredients because I don't know, like what do they say, like the bliss point where like they put all these chemicals to try to, make your taste buds go wild. Like, yeah, again, left to our own devices, we chase after these empty, shitty, pleasurable experiences. But then at a certain point, you're like, is there any substance here? I think that implies in terms of like our actual behavior as humans, but also what we eat. Mm-hmm. And I find myself like, I used to eat a whole bag of Doritos, and now I'm like, oh my god, that's disgusting because like it's all chemicals, and it's like, I don't know.
That's like, also, if you don't eat that stuff for a little bit, like your taste for it just goes away.
No, I don't want it at all.
Yeah.
Like I eat a lot of sugar, but like natural sugar, not like artificial.
Ray Pete thinks sugar is good. I'm not sure. I don't eat a lot of sugar. I eat a lot of like meat and protein and greens and.
I think sugar makes people happier, so that's why.
Nice.
I mean, I'm definitely addicted, but anyway. All right, so moving on from poop and eating. Yeah, so I think what's interesting here, and I think like this kind of echoes the broader kind of movement of what some people call alt literature. You're critical of a particular cultural discourse that is pretty dominant right now in the mainstream. But in a way that's very oblique, that's not like in no way reactionary or unintelligent, but it's mostly funny. And like it was very surprising for me to see these reviews of the book in, again, these very mainstream outlets. So I don't know, it's like it gives me hope to see that it's possible to critique the cultural narrative without going into this like this dumb Fox News type of rhetoric, which is like I think it just fans the flames of, the mainstream. But I don't know. I'm curious to hear, like, first of all, like, did you expect to receive the kind of recognition and appreciation that you got from these more like mainstream outlets?
No, I definitely didn't expect it. I mean, my editor and my agent, and I think even after I did like, I mean, it seemed like most people that had read the book were like, sort of like, kind of trying to prepare me for like they were sort of ominously predicting that it would be like polarizing or whatever, and it kind of just wasn't at all. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't know if that's. I mean, part of it is that like in literature, I am like, if you're writing in what is basically an ideological way, where you're trying to make like fundamentally ideological points and stuff like this, you're kind of like you're just doing like propaganda or this sort of cheap shot type of thing. And I really tried to not do that. And so like, even, I was only interested in the culture war stuff insofar as it related to like, the dynamics of resentment or like human psychology or like, even like our spiritual nature, these kinds of things. And so like, it wasn't, like, I'm not actually interested in like, just like having a culture war. I don't think there's any really real winning there. No. I like art. And that was the other thing too, is like insofar, I tried to mount somewhat of a defense of art in it, where I think one of the worst things about, the sort of current cultural moment is that it like, there's no room for art, in my opinion.
Yeah, and this is something I said. Like, I reviewed Fuckboy, Sean Thor Conroe's book, which some people associate with this larger movement. And I was saying, like, there's this kind of Wildian bent to what's going on here, because, like, if you look at Wilde, he really hated the kind of bourgeois, moralistic, sentimental, just tone of the culture at that time. And instead of attacking it head on in this like propagandistic way, he used his humor. Like, he was super ironic and made people laugh. And sure, like at a certain point people got pissed off, but at least there's a certain credibility when you approach the culture first, like with an appreciation for art, art for art's sake, as opposed to like art as a tool for your propaganda.
Totally.
But also humor. Like, humor has a way to break through the tension and make people say, oh wait, maybe I am like this. Like, maybe I am an insufferable narcissist and I should reconsider why I'm like that.
Well, and I think too, like, one of the problems with the literary culture right now is there's like a mirth drought. You know what I mean? Like, people aren't. I did a panel. I shouldn't talk about this, but I did a panel at the Brooklyn Book Festival over the summer, and the topic was laughter amid the ruins. And so I thought that it would be about humor in literature, and the other panelists would be funny or whatever. And I just didn't understand what the hell was going on. Like, they'd be reading stuff and people would laugh. I couldn't like tell what was funny. It didn't seem very funny to me. And in fact, it started off and they said, like, the panel, this sort of colored the whole panel, as they were like, these three novelists have managed to write works of fiction in a world beset by, climate change, the rising threat of fascism, and blah, blah, blah. And they couldn't laugh at any of those things, right? So like, you could laugh, you could sort of like laugh, you could laugh at jokes about like a bumbling white guy, or you could laugh about like kind of like weird, like nonsense. But you couldn't laugh about things like climate change. You couldn't laugh about things like fascism. You couldn't laugh about anything serious, right? Not that, and so I think part of I think being able to make jokes, that are rooted in a kind of truth is like incredibly important. And also it's just fun. Like, people like to laugh, they like to be charmed or whatever. I think it's just a good,
Interesting. This is random. Have you ever seen the show Rami on Hulu? Have you heard of it?
I've maybe heard of it.
Okay. No, it's this guy who's Egyptian American from Jersey, lives somewhere in the neighborhood now in Brooklyn. But no, basically his whole shtick as a comedian, both like in stand-up and on his show, is like he attacks all the hot button issues, but it's always like he'll go there and like make fun of it, but he won't pick a side at all. Like, you never know like what his actual position is. And like, people from all different ideological, religious points of view like find him hilarious, because again, it's like, it's humor for humor's sake. Like, you're not trying to push anything.
Is he able to? I mean, the other thing is that like, I think a lot of people aren't funny, especially writers, because they can't laugh at themselves. And I think like, for me, like, obviously the narrator is fiction and it's a novel, but like, for me, like, there's this way, when I guess this is, the kind of humor that a lot of literary fiction or like, writer types use now is one in which like the narrator is not implicated, right? So like, they can be a kind of contemptuous observer of what they think are various social ills, and they can even try and snarkily poke fun at them. But when the narrator is not implicated, it's kind of a very tense situation. You know what I mean? And people, audiences, readers, but also like, in general, you just end up with a tense thing where, when people can laugh at themselves, it puts everyone at ease, and there's this kind of like, you can get to something realer than when someone's just and
that's the thing with like this self-seriousness that parades itself as like virtuous and very moral is really vacuous, because again, if you're real with yourself, you'll see you're the first one in need of being critiqued. Like, you are a sinner. Like, sure, there may be systems out there that are problematic and I don't know, like, not all of us are Hitler, of course, but all of us are fucked up
Not
in
yet.
some way. Well, you never know with some of these people.
Sorry.
But yeah, like to not be able to laugh at yourself is a sign that like you really don't understand how much you're implicated in the problem. Mm-hmm. And that's, again, like that's one of the things I was saying about Sean's book, is that sure, it's narcissistic in a way, sure, it's self-indulgent, but like who isn't narcissistic, who isn't self-indulgent? And the fact that like he said in an interview that he was trying to piss off these type of like literary establishment, college educated white boys who, you know, get on their moral high horse and virtue signal. And there are all these reviews written by these, you know, elite white guys who are like, oh my God, Sean's such a narcissist. And it's like, okay, but you're the first one to be like that. So why, you know, I don't know. But then on the other side, I mean, I have to bring this up, that Jordan Castro appears in the novel, who's not you, but it's your name. And a lot of it, so he's like what, like an internet sensation, all these viral videos. A lot of things echo Jordan Peterson in a way. And what's funny about Peterson, as much as he presents himself as, you know, the antithesis of the woke culture and the victimization and all that, the fact that this guy has no sense of humor, it always seems very like melancholic and miserable, is a sign that, okay, like just as much one side may be kind of problematic, the reactionary position really, it's the other side of the same coin. And I was saying to you this before, that like in the debate with Zizek, that there's a point where Zizek is like, I'm trying to, like, don't you see I'm trying to make you laugh? Like, I'm trying to make a joke. Like, you take yourself way too seriously. Even if you have all your big ideas and you think you're right, like, the fact that you can't joke is a sign that something's missing in your ideology. You know? So, I don't know. I want to, like, then I want to go from, I think, like, the antithesis of the Jordan Castro character is this Eric guy. First of all, say a little bit like, who is this Eric character? What are you trying to do with him for people who haven't read it yet?
Sorry, I'm just thinking about what you said about.
We can go back to that.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, So in the novel, there's this guy Eric who the narrator starts kind of like chimping out about. Like the narrator starts like writing, you know, about his friend. And I think Eric was kind of like a stand-in for maybe like your, I don't know, typical kind of like elite literary, like kind of like lib or something, or at least the new kind that has like emerged in the last, however, you know, since 2014 or something like that. And it was just like a lot of, you know, sort of a lot of people that I know, but also, you know, maybe like a former version of myself or something like that. And this like, this way in which kind of, people can use quote unquote, virtue to mask resentment or whatever. You know, there was a lot of, I think for me, there was a lot of people in my life, who had suddenly become good people. You know what I mean? It's like Me Too started happening and, you know, a lot of the social justice movement sort of, gained a lot of cultural and social capital. And then suddenly, you know, the worst guys ever became just great people overnight because they had the right opinions. And they use those as sort of like weapons of resentment, you know, against people close to, you know, against whoever. And so I think, he's kind of like he's kind of that. But he also serves as like a scapegoat for the narrator, sort of because he's more successful than the narrator and this kind of thing. So, yeah. I
mean, Eric's interesting. I think again for me on a personal level to see. I feel like there was this, there's this psychoanalytic tone towards the narcissistic virtue signaler that, like, there was a certain point for me during, I guess, like the whole early stages of COVID and the protests where I had to look at the fact that a lot of my moral posturing was a projection of insecurities that I had that, I don't know, like on the psychological note, there was a turning point for me where I realized, like, most of my life I was exposed to, like, CBT and this very, very therapeutic, like, let's deal with what's on the surface and, you know, try to alleviate your suffering as opposed to digging deeper and asking, like, what's behind all these complexes? How is it part of some bigger cosmic struggle, which I think, like, Jung definitely gets into that. But I don't know, like, it was very liberating for me to be able to say, hey, yeah, like, I'm really narcissistic and I post things on the internet about social issues because I want to be affirmed, I want to be validated. And there are certain wounds in my life from my past that are unresolved. And maybe I should focus more on that before I go blabbering about whatever social issue and how my position is so righteous.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there are many people who really just continue doing that without any awareness of like, why do I do this? Like, how is this filling some kind of hole I may have?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, I think. So when I was younger, like really young, maybe 11 or so, I was like obsessed with punk music,
Mm-hmm.
and so I would like write these like political like essays, I guess, like in my room, and I was like reading like Emma Goldman and Karl Marx and Peter Kropotkin, I guess I say, you know, these like Russian anarchists and this kind of thing, and I was like a total kind of tyrant, you know, with my friends. Like I had a tote bag at one point.
A tote bag.
Listen. Well, listen, this is even before I was like 12 or 13 or something like that. You know, I was really young, and I had like the tote bag. I think it's called the Atria Group. It's one of these like huge companies that owns like every other company. They own Coke, they own, you know, maybe Marlboro, and I'm not really sure, right, anymore. Back then I knew for sure, but it's just like this like way, you know, like the meme of the guy pointing at all the pictures with the dots connecting everything, and I would like scold my friends for like using any of their products and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think and so I was like, you know, and it gave me the ability to sort of point outward at the world and say, if the world was different, you know, then everything would be better. If the world would only conform itself to my will, then everything would be good. And but because these systems are so big and so vast and so like, you know, they infect every single part of human life and so on. You know, you know, they're probably not going to change. And so what it gave me was like a way to justify all of my personal failings and to just point the finger at everyone around me and say the reason why I'm suffering, the reason why my life sucks or whatever is because of all of you and because of these systems it's not my fault. And I think eventually, like, I just sort of got humbled by life, you know what I mean? And I was like, and so that was sort of the impetus for me, because I'm doing some of that deep, like, I guess, quote unquote, you maybe say psychoanalytic, but like spiritual sort of like searching, you know what I mean? And sort of like from that perspective of like humility or of getting beaten down in ways that were like undeniably my fault. And then also had that sort of like radical leftism offering nothing in the way of the power that can help me overcome these things, you know, then yeah.
Because I'm trying to find this part in the book where you basically like bring up this point about people who claim to care so much about humanity, like oftentimes don't give a shit about real humans.
Oh yeah, that's the Max Scheler.
Yes,
German theologian. He says
Scheler has a great piece on Nietzsche and resentment. Have you ever read that?
I read his book. Called Resentment. Or Resentiment or whatever.
Yes,
and it was brilliant. Yeah, and but in it, he has the line about how the shift from the love of neighbor to the love of mankind is really born of resentment. It's hatred, because I can love mankind and hate everyone around me. You know what I'm saying? It's like this violent abstraction.
I mean, that's Hitler and all the, you know, all the big names. Yeah. No, but I think like there comes this fundamental point in our maturity, or like in our growth in maturity, where like we have to ask, do I actually live up to these ideals that I claim to uphold? Like, if I claim to be such a humanitarian, like, do I love the concrete people that I see every day, or am I a big asshole? And I think the problem with a lot of the mainstream discourse we're seeing is that it kind of absolves you from having to have that point of confronting yourself, because you get rewarded for being very vocal and very loud about other people's sins, but to look at yourself and say, hey, like, I'm pretty shitty sometimes, I'm very selfish. Unless, I mean, if you do it in a performative way, sure, maybe you'll get some points, but to really reckon with your brokenness, no, it's not a thing.
Well, especially in a way that doesn't, in a way that can sort of cross ideological lines. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, if you know, it's one thing to say, like, you know, look, I'm a sinner, I'm bad too. Like, I contribute to racialized capitalism, and I, you know, contribute to the patriarchy, and I, you know, like, it's one thing to do that, but if you say something like, you know what I'm saying? That sort of crosses.
Like the white people who like own up to, you know, their white fragility and some of that, you know, it's strange, because it's like some of that stuff does contain within it a kernel of truth. No,
it's like
Absolutely.
I do contribute in various ways to various, you know, webs of suffering.
Yeah.
But like, you know, but to use that kind of like insight to then just like build a weapon to scapegoat others or whatever is not it's this very sinister move on the part of
but there's something about the public nature of those confessions, because like I've seen it, like especially again during summer of 2020, I see a lot of these white people who are I admit I am part of the problem, and I am fragile as a white, and I'm like, yeah, me too, I acknowledge these things, but the fact that you're making a show of it, isn't that you still trying to gain validation off of the, like you're still using people of color to get validation because you're saying like, oh, look at how much I contribute to your oppression. But the fact that you want to publicly talk about it, like you're still trying to benefit. I don't know. Yeah, that's the vibe I kept seeing.
Well, it's strange. I mean, there's a couple of. I certainly. I'm thinking of a couple of things. One is that. I remember remembering this now. I at that time I started listening to. I remember very vividly being at Gold's Gym in College Park, Maryland, listening to the audiobook of what was Robin DiAngelo's
Wife for Jill.
Wife for Jill. Oh, right. Duh. Yeah, exactly. And I was like, I'm going to do my due diligence and just like not like as a white, but I was like, I'm just going to basically listen to like the who I considered the enemy, and I put it on. I was at the gym and I was like, this will be a good time to listen to it because it'll get me chimped out, ready to whatever. And I got so mad within the first like 2 pages that I just turned it off and never listened, because it's this horrible like psychological abuse manipulation tactic where it's like, pay attention to how you're feeling when you hear. It's basically this thing where it's like if you respond to what I'm telling you in any way other than submission, you're proving the thesis. You know what I mean?
I mean, the first problem with her is that like, why are you as a white person telling?
But there's good money, man.
As much as I don't know, like I've had to confront those questions in my relationships with real people, not people in the abstract. And I think that's the main thing, is that again, humanity versus actual humans. Like you can atone for your sins against this amorphous blob of people, but in terms of like, I don't know, where have I been fragile when my friends confront me about something that I have done? Like when you're responding to a real human who you have a history with, you have a sense of responsibility to, like that's when I feel like, you need to own up. And going on Twitter and posting about it, like that's not the same thing.
No, it's not. I mean, it's I think about it in my like personal relationships and stuff. Like it is very difficult to, I'm trying to think of another word besides repent. It's very difficult to like sort of be wrong and to like mend a relationship, and to sort of like humble yourself before another and like ask for forgiveness or whatever. And I was thinking about like these public displays, and it doesn't really happen anymore. So it's sort of just like during, at least not that I see. But like I was reading the other day about how in the early church confession used to be done in front of the church, like the whole church. And so and I know a lot of people like to place, they'll be like, wokeness is just like Christianity, but But to me, like, there is a need, there is spiritual freedom to be found in like confessing your sins, but if it's not in the context of sort of like grace and like, real people in a loving community and this kind of thing, then it becomes totally demonic, because no matter how much you confess, right, they just beat you. So there's no grace, there's no forgiveness, there's no even real repentance,
And that's the difference, that it was, if you did it in public, it was a community who you have a history with, like you have actual relationships. It's not the Twitterverse. It's not
exactly
anonymous, whatever.
It's not, and also it's not an angry. It's not like a bunch of angry people being like confess or whatever. It's like it's a totally different thing. We did this amazing. I told you I've been going to the Orthodox Church. We did this on. I don't remember when it was, but it was like a Vesper service, I think, after the liturgy, where maybe you did this as in Greek Orthodox, where like
that past life.
In your past life, but where like you went around the church.
Oh yeah,
you know what I'm talking about?
That's Forgiveness Sunday.
Yeah, exactly. It was like so beautiful.
Here's the thing with Forgiveness Sunday. So for those who haven't been initiated, so it's one of the Sundays before Lent, where you, after the liturgy, so everybody, at least in the Greek church, everyone lines up and you take turns going up to everyone in the church and like what we do is like you give them a hug and you say, "I'm sorry, forgive me."
In this one, they were like, you said like, how did it go? You said like, forgive me, and then you said like God forgives or something, and then you kind of do like a cheek kiss thing.
Yeah. Okay.
I just thought it was kind of beautiful.
I mean, I have baggage here because with the Greeks, hopefully I don't have any like orthobro listeners. I mean, orthobros aren't even like really orthodox. They're just like LARPers. But real Greek people, like, they're not like super religious. It's like you do that because it's, that's your heritage. It's a ritual we do. So I think, yeah, like it's symbolic. It's a very beautiful thing. But like, unless you actually... within church communities where it's like a real community where you actually like do stuff together and like you've actually sinned against your fellow parishioner and you've said something fucked up to them or you've shit talked them behind their back. Like I do know some communities where they actually have like intentional parish communities where they do these public like asking forgiveness, and it can be very powerful because like if everyone knows you talk shit about this person or like you did something really bad and in front of everyone, you're like, hey, I did this specific thing and it's wrong and I'm sorry and I'm asking in front of everyone. But again, it goes back to what you're saying. It's not like, yeah, you better confess. You better, because we're going to beat you if you don't. It's like, no, like, yeah, you did wrong, but there's this love that embraces you that's much bigger than your sin.
Right.
So yeah, in principle, the forgiveness Sunday could be great.
Yeah, it's always a there are a million ways in which these like traditions that get passed down can just become sort of like dead letter, sort of like just dead mode, where people are like enacting these like disembodied forms or something like that aren't like existentially integrated or whatever. And I mean, and so any kind of thing like that runs the risk of devolving into that. And I mean, even when we did it, the guy next to me afterward was like, "Forgive me for wanting to get the hell out of here," which is like pretty funny, but like yeah. But anyway, so I think some of these. So I think there's some. Some truth when people talk about like place, like, I guess, quote unquote, wokeness in the lineage of Christianity. But like, to me, it's not, some people will then be like, that means that any kind of like, morality in this vein is wrong, or any kind of attempts to like, apologize or reconcile your sin to whatever. And I think for me, these things are, it's just a sort of a malformed version of something that could potentially be good. And
and what's also interesting about Eric is his like staunch anti-natalist position. Like there's the perfect amount of kids to have in the world. It's like you see that
that was a straight up post from one of my old friends.
And I've seen those all the time. But there's like, that's where you see there's something very anti-humanitarian here. And it's like you sacrifice humans for the sake of humanity. But like, why is it that we can't see that when we say those kinds of things? Like, why don't we see how the cognitive dissonance of it all? I don't know. Like, I just feel like we get very blinded by this this moralism, this Puritan kind of. I guess we're afraid of being damned ultimately. Like, we don't want to go to hell, like social hell. So we say these things which are really messed up. But
I think. Yeah, I mean, it's there's definitely a lot of. I mean, there are all kinds of reasons why people aren't aware of their cognitive dissonance, and I think I'm sure myself included, where it's like there are just all kinds of defense mechanisms kind of built up in the psyche or in the soul that kind of are very difficult to chip away at and very difficult to see, and so it's and it's not unique to any one ideology or any one type or something like that. But the antinatalism stuff, I mean, I do think there's like a sort of profound hatred of life kind of lurking beneath the surface of contemporary culture.
Yeah, no, and so like what we were saying before about this point where you confront your own resentment and your own narcissism. On the flip side is this whole like responsibility pilled culture. Like, I'm going to lift myself up by my bootstraps. I'm going to stop complaining. And like, again, from my own experience, I see how much taking that step is crucial, but can go back in a very like self-destructive and immoral kind of direction. So I don't know. I want to hear from you. Like, so if this narcissistic resentment kind of pill culture is not it, and the responsibility pill is also not it. I don't know. How do people move forward from these conflicting discourses we're caught between?
Yeah. Well, one, I think that there's, I think that everybody has like a responsibility, sort of existential and individual responsibility, regardless of your context, to sort of step into your own life and to take responsibility for, for yourself and your loved ones and so on. It doesn't mean that there aren't systems that are affecting you. It doesn't mean that you're not, involved or sort of tied up invariably in like a web of social relations and community and stuff like that. But there is, at least for me, there can be something very empowering about saying, I'm not going to blame other people, even when they're at fault.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to, because to me, like, resentment is to be like avoided like the plague if possible, like to me, resentment kind of instantly corrodes and instantly deceives. It's kind of this sick, brain worm or something like that, that like when it gets you, you just become you just become delusional. And I think that can often happen with just blaming other people, because we have so many defense mechanisms built up. Like I can blame people for things that it's like the classic thing of like the guy who has a shitty day at work and comes home and like yells at his wife about how the meat's overcooked or something. That doesn't happen already, but from the movies or something. But so I think, right. So I think there's like a backlash to the kind of victimism where people are saying, especially like manosphere adjacent people are saying, get strong, get rich, be a man, stand up, or whatever.
Stand up with your back straight.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, but I think that I think there's, I hold two things in my head, and one is that like, I take full responsibility, I guess sorry, I'm kind of jumbling around. One of the things that I've thought about is that a lot of the responsibility pill types, especially like Western kind of individualist people, will say, Christ said, pick up your cross. They sort of use the cross. They say, Christ said to pick up your cross and, take responsibility. But like what they don't remember about that story is that Christ actually took on the sins of the world.
Yeah.
Christ didn't say, I'm being responsible for my sins. He said, I'm being responsible, I'll take responsibility for everyone's sins, and you should pick up your cross and follow me. And so what that would mean, and Father Sarah from Rose actually has a great, you know who that is? Yeah. I'm not wholeheartedly endorsing him. Okay. Oh, but he has like a great line about like, regarding everyone else as angels and yourself as a worse sinner. And okay, maybe that's an overstatement, but to me, it's this weird thing where it's like, our sins aren't, and our faults aren't totally separable from one another. They can even be, the effects of my behavior can spread out into generations. If I'm a horrible father and my son turns out a certain way because I wasn't there or something like that, then like I bear some responsibility for that. Yeah. But at the same time, if he, I don't have a son, God willing one day, but like, if he spends his whole life blaming me and not taking responsibility for his own life somehow, then that's a trap as well. And so it's this weird, it's like a both and scenario where it's like you can be simultaneously a victim and responsible, not responsible for your victimization, but responsible for your actions, for how you respond to that victimization.
Yeah. And this is, this is the thing with the responsibility pill, the manosphere, that it presumes that we have the power to take responsibility for ourselves, and also like to pretend that we're not victims. Like I have been victimized by people. Like people have inflicted injustices upon me, starting with my own parents. And it's not that I forget that I've been hurt by these people. It's that there's mercy. It's like, yes, you hurt me, objectively speaking, but I recognize that there's this greater, like you're not defined by this thing you did to me, like that you're loved first by God, but that I can love you even though you don't deserve it necessarily. And that me picking up my cross, picking up my bootstraps, it's not my effort, it's the recognition that I'm loved. And then I think this is where like the need for community, to rely on people, which is not to say like I put my responsibility off onto other people, but I share it. Like there has to be this sense that my agency is shared with others in this communal kind of setting. Because otherwise, if I'm just lifting myself up, I'm going to fall again. Totally. It's never going to work.
Well, and it's also just this bizarre individualism that is kind of like has sort of seeped into so much, especially in America. So much of our thinking like is just like it's just been totally corrupted and corroded by this kind of individualism where like suddenly the prevailing wisdom is this weird idea like my parents have nothing to do with me. Yeah, or something like that. Yeah. You know what I mean? Or whatever. Like or like I'm just this kind of like atomized, self or something like that, operating independent of any history or family or.
That goes back to this whole like CBT narrative. Like because we want to oust Freud, like we totally forget that our psyches are shaped by the people who brought us into the world.
Also, CBT is good for like if you're having like thin problems.
Yeah, no, it's not useless at all.
But it's not good if you're having problems that go very deep. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because it's not a behavioral thing fundamentally, or like even like a thinking thing. There are problems that sort of precede thought.
And I think like this is ultimately what's like really helpful about the novel is that okay, he's making fun of these these virtue signalers, these victimhood addicts, whatever. And yet he doesn't, he's able to make fun of himself and realize like, okay, but I can't even like stay off of Twitter for 5 minutes. Like I think the humor thing is the first step to recognizing like, hey, I'm not perfect. Sure, maybe I've been victimized by others, but also I've done messed up things to other people. So like I gotta laugh at myself. But also I think there is this like very implicit sense of grace, specifically with like the beauty, the sacredness of these everyday kind of rituals. And you even say it at the very end when he's in the forest, like he has this sense of like the goodest of all goods, which I guess like in an Aristotelian sense is the summum bonum, like the ultimate source of goodness, which allows us to be free to say, hey, like I messed up. I didn't get anything done on my novel today, but there is this higher good that I'm seeking, and that, along this journey, I'll find my way. And ultimately, I'm not alone in the universe. Like, it's not just me and my willpower and my strength. But I think that's, like it's in a very subtle way becomes very hopeful without like preaching something,
I'm glad that comes through. Yeah, I appreciate all of your thoughts about it. It's nice to hear you talk about it.
Yeah. And I did want to ask, Kierkegaard does make an appearance.
Oh,
here.
Yeah. I love Kierkegaard.
Yeah. I'm curious why. Like, what is it about Kierkegaard?
He's also a great ironist,
Yeah.
He's funny and witty and all of that. But two, and one of the things that he talked about was sort of trying to be a Christian in Christendom, sort of like how can one be a Christian when they're surrounded by, Christians? It's sort of this funny, like thing of like, I guess for me, Kierkegaard's like kind of, and all the Christian existentialists really, they kind of address the problems and the sort of like questions that I have and stuff sort of head on in a way that like resonates personally. One of these great, he has a great in Works of Love, which I was just rereading, he has a great passage where he talks about, and it's related to the Novelist actually, because in the Novelist, the narrator remembers how Kierkegaard's like first publication was a criticism of Hans Christian Andersen's novels, and he says that he's not a real novelist because his novels don't have a life view.
Okay.
And so he says that like, Hans Christian Andersen might ask a question like, is life really meaningful? And this question can like spread out indefinitely, and it ends up in these like fragmented poetic moods, is what he says. But a better question would be one like, how can I live my life such that it is maximally meaningful? Because it implies a sort of active disposition and like a task. Yeah. And in Works of Love, I was like a couple of nights ago reading this great passage where he talks about how so many like philosophers and thinkers and writers are like the Pharisee who says like, who's my neighbor? And Christ says, love your neighbor. They say, who's my neighbor? And he says that like, the Pharisee is probably hoping that Christ, will go on this long-winded, explanation, or maybe they'll go back and forth, and maybe they'll come to the conclusion that, you can never really know who your neighbor really is, and it is kind of just relative, and, this kind of thing. And he says, but instead, Christ answers questions in a way that traps the asker in a task. And so, you know what I'm saying? And so instead of like engaging in this, because ultimately you can ask questions that are motivated by the desire to just shirk responsibility.
Yeah.
And so
sounds like what theologians do.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly, yes,
know.
100%, right. And theology is right for that, exactly. And
especially moral theologies, which is what I studied, I'm very good at putting off responsibility.
Right, exactly.
But even like, think the rich young man, because he's like, what do I have to do to get eternal life?
Right.
He's like, okay, sell everything. He's
right.
like, wait, no.
Right, exactly. You know, and so it like instantly traps him in the task.
Yeah.
You know, and so like, to me, like the way that Kierkegaard, I am, you know, he speaks into my cowardice, I guess. You know what I'm saying? And he speaks sort of into my, like, you know, he also, in writing his various, you know, using his like different pseudonyms and different things, like he sort of like understands a lot of the different like perspectives and a lot of different sort of like modes of being or whatever that I've sort of fallen in. You know, like I guess basically he just hits for me. You know what I mean? Like in a way that's like not many others do. You know, Dostoevsky is the exact same. Where like for me, like he like can address, he just speaks into my, you know, idiocy and my, like, I don't know, just I read it and it feels like a revelation, you know.
Yeah, and one of the things that when I would teach Kierkegaard, I would always juxtapose him with Augustine. Because in a way, they're both Christian existentialists dealing with the abyss and the brokenness, the limited and the finite, whatever. What's different about Augustine is that his main point of reference when understanding, like, who is this infinite being, it's always relationships with people. Like, it's always these encounters, starting with his mother, then Marcus Victorinus, and then, I don't know, but he's always, like, referring to, like, God's grace operating through actual people and relationships, whereas Kierkegaard, I feel like, is super in his head, super abstract. And it's like he's talking about the same concepts, but I don't know. It's different when, like, going back to what we're saying, you're responding to an actual concrete person in front of you.
Yeah. He was weird. I actually thought of him when you mentioned the psychoanalyzing thing with the Eric character, because his nickname, you know what this? When he was a kid, his nickname was Fork.
No.
They called him Fork, and like if you Google Kierkegaard nickname, it just comes with a picture of him, it just says Fork next to it. Because because I guess when he was a kid, he could like see straight to your like personal problems or something, like you're and just cut straight to the core of you with like a biting insult or something like that. And so he'd poke at you, which is why they call, like, you know, which is why they called him Fork, I guess.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Why don't just call him Knife? Because he doesn't want to kill you.
Yeah, I don't know. It could also, I guess, be like a translation thing. You know, I don't really know.
Yeah,
but
maybe Danish forks are more deadly. I don't know.
Yeah, but yeah, I love him. I don't know. Yeah.
Kierkegaard. Okay. All right. So let me ask, do you have any plugs before we wrap up? Any things you want people to check out, whether it's your stuff, your platforms, or other people, anything?
Kierkegaard Works of Love is a pretty good book. Yeah. The Novelist. I mean, it's not, I want to plug my wife's novel, but it's not, you can't order it yet. It's called Bitterwater Opera.
Nice. So look out for
that. Right. That might be it for now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Jordan,
Thank you
for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.